They never camped this far away from home, let alone in a cabin in the wilderness. Sounds like your typical horror story beginning. Alex made a spooky face as he held the flashlight close to his chin. Very funny, asshole, Tasha said. She pushed him back. Tasha and Alex had been dating for quite a while, and at this point, they already planned to have a house and a child by the time they were 30. Young love. Currently cresting 24 years old, Alex realistically didn't know how they would achieve this feat, but it didn't matter. You see, they loved each other more than life itself, and that's all they really cared about. Everything else would fall into place, so Alex thought. They headed into the cabin where Alex decided to get the fire going. I'm gonna cook some dinner. I'm starving, Tasha said from the kitchen. Sounds good to me, Alex shouted back as he threw a few pieces of wood onto the fire. After dinner, they sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket in front of the fireplace. Then Alex began to set the mood with a bit of a spooky story. Hey, so do you know why we got this cabin for so cheap for a full week? No, but I'm sure you're going to tell me. Oh, I'm going to tell you. You just buckle up for a creepy fucking ride. Alex hit the light on the side table, plunging the rest of the cabin into the darkness, save the natural light from the medium-sized fire. With the firelight wiggling and moving, sending shadows dancing across the walls, it didn't take long for the creep factor to set in. Alex pulled the cover up and got nice and snuggled, and then began his story. What you're about to hear is the unnerving story told to Alex by the landlord of the property. So after I shook his hand and gave him the rest of the deposit, he stopped me before putting it in his pocket. When I asked him what was the matter, assuming I had not paid him enough, he said the money was fine, but he only felt it was right to give me the whole story of why he's asking so little for such a nice cabin in a secluded, gorgeous place. I thought it was bullshit, but I humored him. He started telling me about how his father owned the property years ago. He came into it as a payment from someone who owed him a huge favor. He said the man had run some squatters off the land when he first got here. He said they weren't the right type of people to be living on this land. His father didn't think anything of it, just thought he was a little touched in the head. Soon after receiving the property, he started noticing odd things. Things like he would put something down and find it in a completely different place. Or the dog that he would start acting weird out of nowhere, and then he would catch him staring off into space, deadlocked in a stance like he found something and was fixed on it. Then, let's not forget the time he was going out to do maintenance on the driveway, and he got the overwhelming sensation like he was being watched. So strong the sensation was that he actually turned around expecting to see someone waiting to get his attention. He also talked about how the area had an overwhelming feeling of unease. His father, whose name was Richard, chalked it up as paranoia. I mean, maybe he felt bad that the land he inherited was taken from someone else. With that said, his dad decided it would be a nice place to turn into a little B&B. So he got to work setting everything up. While spending the night a few days before the opening, he was awoken around 3 a.m. by a loud bang. It sounded as if it was coming from outside, but where? He couldn't pinpoint it, so he got up, grabbed a shotgun, patted the dog awake gently, and went to investigate. After walking outside to see if someone was hitting the door, it was then that he realized the sound was actually coming from inside. He also realized his dog had not followed him out. Starting to get a little creeped out, he slowly made his way back into the house. Tracing where the sound was coming from, he found his dog, once again, locked in a position as if he just found something and was going to attack. After some sort of investigating, he found that the sound was originating from a spot on the floor near the crawl space. At this point, he was ready to call in backup, but the closest person to him was still 20 minutes away. So he decided to just pop the door on the crawl space and take a peek inside with his flashlight. Harmless, so he thought. What was odd about this was that when he got down on his hands and knees to pull the hatch up, He realized it was nailed shut. He also couldn't explain why his dog, King, a huge German shepherd, took off running towards the bedroom and dove under the bed whimpering. Grabbing an old hammer, he started prying the nails up until there was nothing holding the door in place. "You big baby," he yelled to King, who quietly stayed under the bed watching him with intent eyes. Once he popped the last nail, the knocking stopped. The sudden quiet made the man pause, his actions in question whether or not he really wanted to open that door were of no consequence. He whistled for King, but the dog did not respond. "Bunch of help you are, you wuss," he yelled at his terrified dog. After taking a deep breath and amping himself up, he popped the latch and pulled the door up. The amount of dust and the putrid odor hit him like a freight train. Good God, it smelled of death and burnt vomit. He covered his face with a rag and started to shine his flashlight. For a second, he could have sworn he saw something move in the darkness. Wouldn't be surprised if there was a rodent or creatures living under here, he thought to himself. He moved the flashlight around and started to step down into the crawl space. Once completely down, he shined the flashlight all around. It was odd how large it seemed down here, like it could go on forever. Then he noticed a slight reflection coming from the far corner. He started to make his way over, keeping his flashlight trained on that area. Once he made it to the spot, he swept the dirt away and uncovered what looked like a huge white piece of rock. As he examined it a little closer, he started to realize this was no rock. As someone who was an avid hunter, he knew exactly what this was. It was a bone. Clean and white, this bone had been there for a very long time. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, he heard the hatch door slam shut, and with no light coming from above, he shined the flashlight up, and of course, with his rotten luck, the batteries in the flashlight completely died. He was lost to find the area where the door was. He could hear King barking wildly and ferociously. He had never heard his dog bark like that before. He whispered to himself not to panic. Take a deep breath. And just search for the area of the floor above his head where the door could be. While he combed back and forth through the crawl space, he started to become anxious. Then, he heard it. The knocking. This time it sounded like it was coming from right above his head, to the left. Quickly he turned, but with no flashlight, there wasn't much he could really see. Then, maybe not knowing exactly where he was, if anyone was in the house, maybe King could get to him and chew him up a little bit, he thought. Sitting there, sweating and stressed out in the dark, trying not to breathe too loud, he heard the knocks getting closer. Once the knocking reached where he was sitting, it stopped. It was at this point he realized King was no longer barking, and everything went quiet for what felt like an insane amount of time, but was probably no longer than a minute. Complete silence. All he could hear was his labored breathing. Then, without warning, he heard breathing that was not of his own. And then he felt the cold, heavy breath on his left ear. And it was at that point that he blacked out. When he awoke, he was in his bed like nothing had ever happened. Well, I'll be damned, he thought, if that wasn't the most disturbing and realistic dream I'd ever had. He sat up on the edge of the bed and whistled for King, but his good boy didn't come. As he made his way to the bathroom, he froze, sheer terror gripping him in its icy clutches. As he looked down and saw the dirty footprints leading from the living room, he started to get a little nervous. Maybe it wasn't a dream. After finishing the story, the current homeowner rubbed the back of his neck, wiping away the cold sweat he broke into. So I looked at him, and I guess he could read my expression, because he immediately said, "Hey, I'm just the messenger. But I thought I'd let you know the facts that I am sure of. For instance, the police investigated the property and found the bones. They belong to the original owners. The man who gave my daddy the property, he never ran them off. That's the thing. He killed them, and he stole their land. He was arrested, and being that there were no next of kin, and my daddy did sign the deed, it was rightfully his. But what made my daddy really lock the door and hightail it out of here was the fact that the police found his dog. They said it looked like the dog had been torn apart by a wild animal. Forensics couldn't understand how there wasn't a single drop of blood to be found, like the dog itself was sucked dry." Alex looked over at Tasha and asked her what she thought. "Honestly," she asked with a wry smile, "sounds like a bunch of bullshit to me. I mean, think about it. You're not doing so well, so you make up some attractive story about your place being haunted, and bam, now you have clientele. Wouldn't surprise me if the price was so cheap because he wasn't sure how well it would do." "True," Alex replied, and then his face went completely slack, and his eyes became wide, and he spoke with stuttering breath. But how do you explain? What the hell?" he managed to force out, and right as Tasha went to turn her head, he jumped at her and growled. "Oh my fucking God, you asshole! Are you trying to give me a heart attack?" Tasha screamed as she held her heart to keep it from bursting out of her chest. Alex laughed, a deep, low belly laugh. And he apologized as he wrapped his arms around her. Exhausted from the day's events, they slowly drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, sleeping so peacefully and warm, cuddled together under the covers. Until the knocking started.